Welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. Today we have Bernie Franzgrote with us. Bernie, welcome to the show. Would you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about what you do?
Jeff, pleasure to be here. What do? I do stuff, and I say stuff because it depends on who I'm talking to. And that's kind of the knack of creative insight. And there's a double entendre pun in there because I also run a podcast called Knack for Business and run East Trade Winds. So creative insight is basically a networking component where I help talk to someone and connect them with other people. I think of it like a Venn diagram. You have a circle of friends. I come along with my circle and introduce you to another circle. And so I cross-pollinate like a good virus.
I love it. By the way, my favorite diagram is the Venn diagram. My favorite dad joke is circles are pointless.
One hopes so. otherwise it's sitting on top of you. Ow.
Love it. Now, let's talk about your journey. So first of all, how did the podcast come about? And then we'll talk about how the podcast impacts your business. And I feel like you and I are going to talk a lot about the cross-pollination because that's one of my favorite approaches to business.
So pandemic, everything seems to start from the pandemic, and it doesn't. Actually, the pandemic was just a catalyst. So Zoom became a prevalent thing, chatting with people locally, and then all of a sudden, look, I'm talking to people out west, out in BC, and then all of a sudden I'm talking to folks in the UK, Europe, South Africa, States, and Australia. And as I was going through this, someone said, hey, by the way, why don't you do a podcast? Because you talk to a lot of different people, a lot of different stories, and it's almost like having a storybook, except in this case, it's business, right? And it's all about what do you do and what's up with that? And then you hear interesting stories and you come back. And that all kind of feathers back to what's happening inside Creative Insight. The Creative Insight space, it's like making those connections. So I get to spend an hour with somebody, and it's like a little mini MBA course, and I'm going, well, you know what? And later on, I can introduce the person and bring that podcast along. And if they address a problem that another person is meeting or needing fixing or needing some TLC, or they're also addressing the same problem from a different perspective. So there's a collaboration point. So that's kind of the quick nutshell. I can go on a bit longer, but we don't have a bottle of scotch with us, and I'll stop there.
I love it. And I think one of the things a lot of people say, oh, should I start a podcast? And my answer is always, it depends. And I think for me personally, if I wasn't curious, I don't know that I'd want the podcast. But the other thing I would say is if you're not willing to do the work, maybe you start, and this is probably the good advice, and I want yours, start as a guest on someone else's podcast.
I think what's going to happen, I had the good fortune that there was a gentleman, his name is Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple. He did a little training exercise. So if you don't get some schooling in a certain subject matter, or you have not been in an environment like a TV studio or any other type of other communications platform, you really don't know. You get an idea, but it's not the same thing as going, okay, this has to happen. Like, there's a recipe to making things successful. So yes, coming in as a guest, just, how does this work? You'll see there's communication coming to you. There's an echo back and forth. The show transpires. You get to watch the, live, everything happening live as it unfolds. And then, you watch what happens after. It's, things are done. Now there are more steps, kind of like an iceberg. There are things that are not seen. So if you don't like editing, then you're going to look for someone that can help edit for you, right? And again, I'm doing a shameless plug for Carl, but that's an example. There are the people out there doing that. And in fact, right now, based on the Knack for Business podcast, I'm getting people that are basically have clients that are, I want to be on a podcast. Find me a podcast to be on. The next thing you know, I'm getting this email, and I had a list of like 15 people on the list now. So I'm looking down the list and going, they all kind of hit the mark of what I do, who I want to talk to, all fascinating. And in fact, one person that was on the list was already been on my podcast two times before. So like, hey, that's cool. So it's a good rhythm. So from my end of the perspective, it's good. From the person that wants to be a guest, it's really good because now I get to know them. And if I have a project that's outside of what I'm doing now, and I need a subject matter expert in X, in location Y. Now there's a resource out there I can work with, and they know me. It's not a cold call, so and it becomes a networking tool.
Yeah. And it's funny because a lot of people will ask me about the vanity metrics, how many downloads, how many likes. And for me personally, as you said, it's a networking tool. I use it to introduce people in my network, and I find it fascinating because I can say, go watch this, and if you still think you want to meet Bernie, let me know and I'll make it happen, as opposed to the old way I used to do it, where I'd send an email and then both people would privately message me and go, why are you connecting us? And I'm like, it's in the email. I told you so-and-so. And, it also fascinated me because even though I'd give context, I'd say, you and Bernie should talk. He's a great strategic partner. He can connect you with somebody that'll do this. Then the person would email you and say, oh, hey, Bernie, I've got widgets. How many do you want? And it's like, where did that come from?
Well, no one's offered me their widgets yet, so I'm grateful for that. There's enough widgets in the office as it is. Any more may be crowded.
I love it. Now, in terms of your podcast, how do you decide, first of all, if somebody's a good guest, and then how do you filter that going forward?
Well, when someone, for example, a podcast company sends me somebody, and I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the person's name, I'll check their LinkedIn profile, see what's on, what's kind of the backstory. One quick way to have the sorting hats, I say, hey, pick a meeting time. Here's my calendar link. And if they don't show, and stuff happens, and I get it, we can always rebook. But if they never show and they never call, well, there's a self-prophecy happening here. And if you don't know it, then either you got or you won the lottery ticket, or something other major happened in your life. Carry on, my wayward son. No harm, no foul. Then I go into having a conversation. There are people I've talked to, and their ability for gift of gab, like just having a relaxed conversation, is stilted, for lack of better words. It just, and they might have a really interesting topic. So, could I do a subject matter about them? Absolutely. Would I have them talk about it? It'd be like hiring someone to sing opera, and they can't sing at all. And if that were me, only for the effect of pushing people away, and that's not the intent. So I try to figure that out. That, and also what they're going to talk about. So at a certain point, I've talked to a fair number of coaches. And of course, they're coming back with something unique, where someone says, "Listen, this is my buddy." And we'll have a chat ahead of time. So that's a screening chat. I'm trying to pick something up. But they tell me something fascinating, and it sounds true and legit. Great. There are areas that I think I'm going to stop. And like one guy, this was, again, self cutting off piece. He never showed up. And he was dealing with precious metals, and he wrapped it up into some sort of Bitcoin affair. And so you could buy precious metals, and you would have the asset, not in your hand, but you'd have ownership of the asset. And I'm sitting there like, I was feeling that, and he never showed up. And I'm, you know what, that's good enough for me. And I didn't seek it out. So I've had a couple podcasts where someone said, please, you should interview this person, and then I've interviewed it, and it was interesting. I don't think anybody would have gotten a lot of strength out of it, unless of course they could relate to the person, and that person was extremely unique. So if the person's too diverse, in other words, I'd have to have an audience that would specifically bandwidth, and if there are only like 10 people in the world that could relate to that individual.
I love it. Now I'm going to pivot slightly because I know, and this is part of this show, my people always have multiple interests. So let's talk about how the podcast supports your business, and how, as a business owner with Creative Insight, you tie the podcast in, or is it sort of two separate things side by side?
They run parallel, much like earlier when I said, I'll introduce people. This person can help you, you can help that person, or you both have a common interest and do a joint venture or kind of a collaboration piece. So the Knack for Business and Creative Insight, it just kind of runs parallel to each other. Could they be separate from each other? Absolutely. But at the same time, they can come together, and there's crosstalk. Much like you have some car manufacturers, they'll have different divisions. You see that in the North American makes.
Yeah.
They'll have, this is your standard fare, this is our higher end fare. You see that in even the Japanese makes, right? They just label the vehicle differently, but it's the same manufacturer. So you can have that coexistence, and at the same time, it doesn't stop you from sharing information, right? You're going back and forth.
Yeah, I love it. Now, how does Creative Insight benefit from the podcast? Because I just want to make a case for people that if you're looking to grow your business, podcasting is a viable path.
Yeah. Well, the Knack for Business is a marketing tool, so it's part of the funnel. And not to be cheesy, like you can get information in there and go, well, I really want to hear what this person has to say, and they tell you something of interest, and you reach out to them. Wonderful. Like there's a lawyer in Texas. He deals with estates, wills, and trusts. If you're in Ontario, where I am, no, that's not going to work out. He can't write you. He can't write your will. He can do it in Texas. He can't do it in Colorado. He can't do it in New York. That type of thing.
Yeah.
So there's kind of a finite bandwidth. Mind you, some of the concepts he's talking about are universal. So from a Creative Insight piece, if I'm getting into a project with somebody, or I'm adding people to a network where they might want to become paying members, great. Again, it kind of blends it in. So the question I ask is, when do you see results? When do you see financials? And so the financials may not be, here's a candy bar. Do you want to buy the candy bar, Jeff? Yes, I do. There's a transaction. It's like a one-to-one moment. Some of this might be the second or third layer in, and it leads you into the path of what you want and what works well. It's not to mislead anybody. It's more to, listen, you're getting to know me. Is this what you want? Okay, so here I go. And I've dealt with other people in the last 4 or 5 years. Felt comfortable with them, etc. And I don't know what happened in their life. They started doing stuff, and I'm going, you know what? I'm going to back away, because I'm getting a gauge that things aren't running 100%. And then I hear more, and now things are totally off the rails, right? So, not that I can't support the person, but I can't recommend the person, right? So that's kind of where it comes in and starts building out, and where you can develop a community around you. Resources, right? The people you're talking to are resources as well as you. So, and when I'm having a chat with somebody, there is no expectation. Like with Jeff, when we're talking, I don't have an expectation. Jeff, I need to see 5 more people on my list from you.
Yeah.
No. It's like, Jeff, tell me about you. What's your story? Unfold the story. And I'm like, hey, cool. And when we chatted about some aspects about using KDP and Amazon, etc. And that's cool. How do you do that, right? And it's a quid pro quo. It goes back and forth. So information has a strong value too. So keep that in mind, right? And it may not make you the secret sauce moment, but it gives you understanding what else is happening in there. So it's a multiple layers of activity. It's not a simple linear thing. It comes with flavor, spice occasionally.
Yeah, it's not a pure transaction. And I think, it's funny because I've had a few people, first of all, they'll lead with, are you willing to pay my appearance fee, or how much do you charge? And if you say I don't, they're like, why not? It's like, because I'm getting to know you, you're getting to know me. And I use my podcast genuinely. If I interview somebody and they don't appeal to me, I'm not going to introduce them to people in my network, no matter what the financial upside could be, because my network is looking to me and saying, well, Jeff vetted them, whether I say that or not. They say, well, Jeff, he was on your show. So for me, it's about building that relationship. And, I get a lot of criticism from friends of mine who teach cold calling, and they're like, why are you wasting your time on a podcast? And the answer is because I hate cold calling.
But I know a guy that can do it, right? So
Yeah.
If you want cold calls, here you go. That person
Yeah.
enjoys that, enjoys the rejection, or they're really thick skin, or all the above.
All the above. Maybe they got too much love as a child. I don't know what it is, but for me personally, and again, they go, well, then it's for business development. I'm like, no, it's a networking tool. And they're like, I don't understand. And it's like, I don't expect you would. You're willing to cold call people. I want to build a community. And I think that's something you and I both resonate with is, it's not about a transaction per se. It's, knowing the people in my network, knowing who needs to meet who. And then I love nothing more when I make an introduction and two people start something together. And, sometimes they're going to go into business together. Sometimes they're going to cross promote together. Sometimes one becomes a client of the other. I love those moments, but they're not also expected all the time.
That's right. The one thing, having done well over 300 podcasts, actually, I think recording right now, we probably got about 50 or 60 in the can that haven't been produced yet. So we'll have about 400 at the end of this season 3. Now, but if someone came up to me and said, Bernie, I want to do a podcast and I want you to do the interview piece and I just want you to frame it around me. Yeah, I can do that. That would be a fee-based service. Yeah. And can we do it? Absolutely. Right? And make sure everybody walks away happy, and then off to the races. Help them set up a connection feed. The important thing is if you're going to do a podcast, and I think you already understand this, and you know it. Consistent. You just can be consistent. You don't have to. You have 60 minutes to do a podcast. It can be 15. It can be 30. And you just have to shape it so that it's to the point, and when you go to push it out, that it captures the eye, and then you put it as part of any email you're pushing out, or any funnel that you're capitalizing on, or on your website or a blog, etc.
I love that, and I think a lot of people don't want to do the work, so it comes back to either it's part of your brand and you do it right, or it's not, and you keep it separate. So, again, given creative insight, I think you've got a certain standard you've got to live up to. Now, what would you give to somebody as advice if they're just starting out and they're thinking about, should I be a guest on a podcast? Yes or no? What would you like people in my network? Because realistically, Bernie, I'm just going to say it, my people are going to want to be guests on your show because I think they'd be a perfect fit. What do you wish they knew before they said, Bernie, I want to be a guest on your show?
I think you want to pick, and I've had some people going, hey, I'd like to be a guest on your podcast. I've just spent 30 minutes talking to them going, you have a rich environment of information. Yeah. And then what should I talk about? I'm going, so you can just talk about what we touched on. Pick a burning hot topic in your client base, or something people don't know about something. Like, here's from the U.S. IP law, intellectual property law, that in their U.S. Constitution, baked right into not as an amendment, baked right in. If you have a bright idea, it is your idea. And I'm going, well, interesting. The Americans did that back in the day, 1700s, 1700s, 1765, I believe. At least I'm paying attention to their lineage. And where did they come from? Well, they came from Europe, right? And what did Europe have? Kings and queens, right? And the king would say, the crown would say, you came up with a great idea. Thank you. It's my idea. I now own it. So I get why it's a cool little element, right? Can it serve me any purpose? No, but it's just, it's like, that's awesome to know that, right?
Yeah.
So you'll have tidbits of information like that. So that's what you want to bring forward. I think if you want to be a podcast guest, what you want to have is your photo, your logo, a couple variations of your bio, and even talking points and suggested titles. And bear in mind that the person doing the podcast might look at that going, oh, he's part of this. I may do a combination of that.
Yeah.
I use an optimizer to get kind of a higher scoring on the titles so that it has an emotional value. So it catches the eye of people. And one guy, I picked a title, and he's a financial expert. He says, well, that doesn't represent me. He says, it's not meant to represent you. It's meant to catch the eye of the person who doesn't know you.
Yeah.
And I get it. It'd be like showing up with tassels on your coat, right? That's not me.
Yeah.
No, I understand that, but the tassels will draw the eye, and then you don't have to carry the tassels all the way through.
Yeah. The funniest thing I've learned from a podcast guest is that in Canada, it is legal to carry a sword. Problematic, but legal.
Wreck the furniture.
Yeah. What I love about the podcast, I never know where it's going to go. And I want to ask you about this because a lot of people, I hear a lot of debate. You should have standard, I think it's John Lee DeMoss teaches you should have your standard questions. And I'm very much, if you show me a standard entrepreneur, I'll ask standard questions. I haven't met one yet. So I have conversations. Do you have standard questions, or do you see where the conversation goes?
Well, what I do is I provide a script to work from, but the script is not meant to be uber rigid in any way, shape, or form. It's just if all of a sudden everybody has that pregnant pause and going, well, what should we talk about next? Well, Stimpy, look hard over to the left. There's the script on the screen, and here's a question. Maybe the idea is it starts the conversation. It's not meant to be the conversation, right? Yeah. And as you unfold the story, and I have a co-host with me, and we're sitting there going, oh, and we might know about the subject, we might not know, and we might ask questions, well, what's that mean? And we try to do it from the audience's perspective, and so which will help unfold the story. So if you as a guest should be relaxed, and so not that we're not plying you with alcohol or anything like that. We just be relaxed. We'll joke around a little bit. We'll start up. We'll make sure our phone is away from the desk. Any external noise sources are kind of mitigated if possible, because screaming dogs and barking kids are never appreciated. It can be for comic relief. Yeah. But so you work those things out.
I once had a guest. We started recording just as his gardening crew came to do the spring cleanup, and it was, he was like, "We can talk over the buzz saws and the leaf blowers," and I'm like, "No, we can't. It's literally driving me crazy, and nobody's going to listen to that."
No. Yeah. The other thing you want to have that is really important as a guest, if you're doing remote, make sure your camera has. You're doing an audio podcast, great, but if you're going to do audio and video, make sure your camera has some oomph, and then make sure your lighting's set up and play around with it, right? Like right now, this setting here, I've got a light to my left, a light to the right, and one above me, and none of them are. I'm not a lighting technician. It's just a matter of me playing with. I can adjust a couple of the lights for the intensity and the color hue, and it works for me, right? Now I have a microphone and I have a headset. The headset is so I don't hear anything else. And if my computer's on and it goes ping, ping, you don't hear it. I do, and I'm going that. And the mic is just, it's a good grade quality mic. But I've had people come on the show and they've just used the headset that came with their smartphone.
Yeah. And for what it's worth, smartphones, if you're doing audio only, smartphones are great for audio because they're optimized to remove background noise. So
yeah,
it's I actually years ago, I was at a major conference, and this is probably 5-6 years ago, one of the guests was a podcaster, and I was just shocked because he sat down with his iPhone and he was recording with people walking around, and I'm like, and he said it is great because it filters out a lot of the background. So
Nice, very nice.
now he also bought, extra external microphones and, but literally everything he did, his was obviously an audio podcast, but everything was managed right there on his phone.
Very nice. Very nice.
And, what he did was, again, you're out and about, you're networking, go to a conference. Why not pull a few people aside and say, hey, what are you doing here? What are you learning? What are you enjoying about it?
Yeah.
Now,
doing live too, even if, look at TikTok or Instagram, right? People will be in the moment. Some are well staged, you can tell, because you know what, no one's holding the camera that's partaking, right?
Yeah.
But it's staged, but it's like doing a little TV production. You just have to remember to look at the camera, to say your piece, and know that there's some editing happening somewhere in the background, because someone will go, oh no, let me rephrase that, and then that gets clipped out.
I love it. Now, for what it's worth, I stopped editing a long time ago because I say and ah, and I was over editing it, and then people would be like, you don't sound like that when you talk. But I'm like, yeah, that's true. So I leave mine in, but I do know I had one guest who asked my editing process, and I said, I don't think we're fit.
At the end of the day, you'll end up developing a style, and if people like the style, they'll flow with it. I think that the focus is on the message and how the conversation is going. For myself, I edit ums and ahs out, because sometimes I'm sitting there going, there's a bit of a rambling moment here, and that's gone. Because if you're the listener, my podcasts are usually anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes long. And so if it gets a little too long in the tooth, then I might end up losing people, right? So let's kind of stay on topic and focus. However, that said, other shows are live, and it is what it is, where it is. And there's probably a 30-second delay for beep.
Yeah, I think in the early days, I used to watch. I don't know why I watched it on TV. I don't remember why, but there was a show about Howard Stern making his show, and it was just fascinating to me to watch all of the work that went into it. And there was his producers had a heck of a job, because if it wasn't him, it was somebody else making the beep.
Yep.
And for what it's worth, Bertie, I had a guest once who he was a cross between a trucker and a sailor, and I told him up front this particular show was family friendly, and then he just started dropping F-bombs because he wanted to see if I could edit them all out, and I really annoyed him because I didn't. And he's like, you make me look like a trucker. I'm like, who was swearing all the time?
Yeah. What, is the dress not fitting?
Exactly. It's like, hey, I didn't edit those in. You put them in. I just didn't edit them out. So anyways, Bertie, you and I could chat all day, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of the people who have been guests on the show need to meet you, and I'll make sure that happens. Is there any parting thoughts you would have for my audience? And then I'll wrap up with where people can connect with you.
Sure. So parting thoughts. First off, a podcast is like having a conversation. Like you're going for a coffee, and think of it that way. So if you have the stage fright, and if stage fright's not your problem, then your next thing is, what's your message you want to get out there? So there's a little bit of prep. You want to do that. You can do it off the cuff, but you have a little bit of prep. And that way, if there's something you really want to drive home, and again, when I'm doing a podcast, I'll give a person 20 questions ahead of time. And I'll say, listen, are there any questions you want me to make sure I focus on? No. Okay. Are there any questions you want me to stay the heck away from, because either it's not your field or no, just no, not going to touch that with a 10-foot pole? fine, because it's not a stress test. It's I just want a good flowing conversation. I'm going to get to know you. You're going to get to know me, and Wayne, my co-host, and then we're off to the races. So it's like, or you're having a pint somewhere at a pub. Same deal, right? Except you might have more F-bombs coming out, going, what were they thinking? But other than that.
And don't show up after pints at the pub either. I think.
No.
Too many pints.
Yeah. You want to be able to enunciate properly so people can understand you, as opposed to going, oh, okay, you're a poster child for something, but not this.
Yeah, love it. Well, and where can people find you, Bernie? Where's a good place to connect and learn more?
Well, if they're looking at the video version of this, they can scan that QR code. Now, you're probably going, hey, Franzgrote, why is that backwards? Well, that is courtesy of Google and me trying for love and money, trying to put up a reverse image, because that's my Zoom profile that shows properly in Zoom. I don't know. But you know what? That's the other piece. Sometimes some things don't go as totally according to plan. It's, the plans of mice and men, or first encounter with the enemy, I believe, are two of the items in there. So, but scan the QR code, or you can reach me at creativeinsight.com, and that's spelled KREATIV, and then the word insight, and then .com. And the word creative, the way it's spelled, is in the German way, because the Anglo-Saxon version has already been heavily consumed. So we're looking for a URL that works, but still phonetically works. Yeah, there you go. That's how you can reach me. The easiest way, or look me up on LinkedIn.
Love it. And I think this is a lesson when it comes to technology. We just learn to roll with it. And, sometimes Bernie uses Zoom, I use Google, and sometimes the platforms don't like each other. Doesn't mean the humans can't get along. Right, Bernie?
You know what? And best laid plan. Oh, one other key thing: if you're a host, make sure someone is a co-host, because all of a sudden your system goes, "Oh, here, hold my beer. You're not going to enjoy this," and you drop. You see, by the time you get back in, your show's still lit.
I love that. Great insights, and thank you so much for being on the show today, Bernie.
Jeff, my absolute pleasure. Having a great chat. And in fact, Jeff's going to be on the Knack for Business podcast next week. So that's awesome.
I look forward to it. Thank you, Bernie. And yes, Knack for Business. Check it out. Oh, where is Knack for Business? Can they find it on Spotify, Apple?
Yeah. See, you look for the word Knack like you would like the word knock, except there's an A instead of an O, the number 4, and then the word business, Knack for Business. We're sitting on Simplecast. That's the point of origin, but you'll find us on Spotify, Apple, Google. I think I'm also on Amazon too. I turn on all the switches, all the taps, so we go everywhere. But if you find that I'm not on your favorite platform, let me know, and I'd be more than glad to investigate and get us onto that platform. Because right now we're running about 6,000 downloads a week. If you're in the metrics, but it's obviously generating, because every once in a while I see people popping up going, "You don't know me, but," and then we have a conversation.
And that is my favorite part of a podcast, is you don't know me, but. Or my other is, I was watching you the other day and I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. Well, was I stretching at the time, or was I sitting?
Were you looking through my window? Because I felt like somebody. No, anyways. But Bernie, thank you for being on the show.
Jeff, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
All right. I find it's easier being a guest. You can just chill. So